This is fun.
Do you want to make that a company?
All right, so today we're going to have a great class. We're going to talk about different aspects of quality, which is in chapter 13. And as it relates to quality, we're going to talk about perceived quality and also performance quality. We're going to talk about the relationship between price, quality, benefits, and importantly, value. And we're also going to talk about standardization of products, adaptation of products, and also, who could say what this is? Who could pronounce this?
Product homologation.
Right. And we're going to talk about that, product homologation. And try saying that 3 times fast. Who wants to try and say it 3 times fast?
Product homologation, product homologation, product homologation.
You see?
You
get surprised.
It looks like homologation.
And then we're also going to talk about derived demand.
Jews? Pen down. Derived demand, derived
Good. Perceived quality. Now, first I want to point out that when we talk about quality, it can't just be perceived quality, although perception is important. So the fact that the target market perceives that our product or service is of a certain quality, or in some cases a high quality, is not enough. There's got to be performance quality. And in advertising around the world, we have to make sure that we have proof points. Sometimes we refer to that as pillars of support. So when we advertise our product or service as a multinational company, we have to be able to provide proof for our claims. Did we talk about, and not just as it relates to quality, but all the claims that we make in our advertising? Did we talk about Oreo? Oreo. So Oreo, the tagline for Oreo for quite a long time was America's favorite cookie, which has a certain amount of significance to the target market. But their competitors challenge that. Because what does that mean when you say America's favorite cookie? What does that translate to?
In other cultures, it's not the favorite.
Well, that's part of it. But we need to think about what would be our tagline in other markets. So certainly in the U.S., that's very significant. But why? What does that tell people? What does that tell the customers?
That you can substantiate the claim also.
But what does it mean to say you're America's favorite cookie?
To say that you sell cookies.
That what?
That's America.
Strictly in America.
You're the fattest country's favorite cookie.
I was actually thinking that you were the market share leader. But so what does that mean when you say you're America's favorite cookie? That means you sell more cookies in the United States than other cookie brands. Do you think that people consider that? Do you think consumers consider that when they're making a purchase?
Probably.
Sometimes? All the time?
Sometimes.
It's not something that you consider? What about you guys? What do you think? To be the brand that's the most popular, that's owned by the most people, that's bought by the most people. In some cases, that's part of the decision-making process. Because we're certainly going to be impacted by what we refer to as influencers in the decision-making process. So we might be the end user, somebody is the purchaser, somebody is going to decide, and then there's somebody who's going to influence that decision. So the fact that other people, or in this case, a lot of other people are purchasing or using the product, that could have an impact on sales. Usually that impact would be positive. Not all the time. sometimes it's not an issue for us. It's not something that is going to have a significant impact on our decision to purchase or not purchase that particular brand of the product. But important to note is that that's significant when selling cookies in the United States, but if we're selling cookies in Iraq, if we're selling cookies in Libya, if we're selling cookies in France, then we need to think about whether or not that tagline is going to still be relevant. Now, in some cases, it might be. Why? Why would it still be relevant in some markets outside of the US? What is it that we're selling? Remember we talked about what?
Selling our culture.
Yeah, selling American culture, the idea of country of origin. Remember we talked about that? Now in some markets, or to some customers in a particular market, that might be perceived as a negative. There may be some anti-American sentiment. America's favorite cookie may not be seen as a positive, right? It may not be a positive tagline in that particular market. But as you're pointing out, in a lot of countries around the world, certainly there are customers who want to purchase a piece of American culture. So we need to understand that there's that opportunity for us as global marketers. In the United States, the competitors pushed back and they said, well, wait a minute, you're the market share leader? They said, we sell more cookies in, let's say, for example, drugstores than you do. So it depends on how you look at the market. So we could look at the market in terms of unit sales. So when we look at market share, our share of the market, we could look at what percentage of the total number of units of cookies, right, the total number of packages of cookies that were sold by our brand versus other brands. And we could look at it in terms of dollar sales as well. So in terms of the entire cookie category in US dollars on an annual basis, what percentage of the total dollar sales at retail were our particular brand? Now, what's the issue in looking at it in terms of dollars? Why might another competitor challenge that in terms of dollars?
Yeah, it could be different price.
And so tell us more about that.
So if there's different prices, then, if they buy 10 of their cookies, it may be the equivalent to buying one of yours.
Right, everybody got that? So if we're selling our cookies for $3 a package, and competitors have an upscale brand of cookie that they're selling for, like in Daniel's example, let's say $30 a package, then of course you would think that it's a very expensive pack of cookies, right? That it'd be very easy to say, well, wait a minute, we're the market share leader because in terms of dollar sales, we have a greater percentage of the dollar sales that were sold in the United States in that particular category. Well, yeah, without even getting into the numbers, just based on the example that Daniel gave us, that would seem plausible. Because we're selling for $3, you're selling for $30. So as Daniel suggested, we have to sell 10 packs before we could achieve the dollar volume of the competitor. So that's one way that they were challenged. And the other is by the channel of distribution, as I was suggesting. That in some categories, Oreo sells more cookies than other brands, like in grocery, for example. But that's not the only channel of distribution. There also, cookies are sold in drugstores, they're sold in warehouse clubs. So what they did was, they changed the tagline for Oreos to Milk's favorite cookie. Now, why is that clever? Yeah, Daniel?
It also attracts like moms who want to try their kids to drink more milk, and then it also is a claim that you can't actually challenge. It's claiming an inanimate object's favorite cookies. Oreos.
So they sidestepped the issue of proof points. That's why we're talking about that. You might say, wait a minute, how did we get here? What are we talking? Cookies and taglines? Well, yeah, because we're talking about the proof points and the pillars of support, if you will. And here's a case where a brand that has more than $500 million in sales, could you believe that? Oreos, they sell more than $500 million of products that are branded Oreo. Is that not amazing? That's $500 million.
That's a lot of money.
Is there any legal issues with claiming that you're America's favorite when you might not be? Like, who cares?
The competitors care. That's the issue.
So they're going to sue Oreo? I mean,
Absolutely.
that's what would happen? They could sue them?
Right, absolutely. So that's what I mean when I say they challenged them was
Right,
because
I know what you meant by challenging, like,
yeah.
do
So
what?
yeah, they sued them because they said that's false.
oh,
Right? That's not true. They want to position themselves as being America's favorite cookie. So they're always looking, competitors, and in most competitors, there's a high level of rivalry amongst the competitors in a given marketplace. And so, they're always watching what the competitors are doing and looking for them to make mistakes or do things that are inappropriate so that they could challenge them. So in this case, yeah, there was some issue with the proof points and them being able to substantiate what they were claiming. So,
Consumers' rights groups also get upset about those kind of things as well.
right, absolutely. So there's any number of stakeholders that could challenge the claim. So they addressed that, and like Daniel said, it was pretty clever that, well, you can't challenge them on this tagline because who are you going to ask? Milk? But also another benefit is now they've called attention to a complementary product, which is that people use milk and Oreos together.
You think of Oreos as being healthier than like Chips Ahoy just because you associate a glass of milk next to Oreos right away.
Right, absolutely. So remember when I was telling you about brand associations? So actually I think in some ways their competitors did them a favor because I think overall this tagline gives them more forward momentum in the marketplace. It's more advantageous to them because remember we said when we think about brand identity, we have the brand name, the logo, we may choose to have a symbol, we have trade dress, packaging, slogans, taglines, but the key, the real challenge is to give your brand meaning, to give it an identity, to give it personality, is to create associations with our brand. Strong, unique, and favorable associations. So you came up with a brand name. Yes. And you developed a logo. Great. That's certainly a meaningful accomplishment. That's something that's going to take people quite a bit of time. You're going to have to go through a design exploratory and a brand exploratory. But the really challenging part that takes many years and millions and even billions of dollars is to create associations with our brand. Because our brand name in of itself usually has no meaning. Pepsi, the word Pepsi, in of itself it has no meaning. Kodak has no meaning. Other words, we said, could be suggestive, but the way that you're really going to gain traction in the marketplace is over time creating associations with your brand, and that's why it's actually quite clever. What they did is to create that association with milk. And like Daniel is saying, milk is already positioned in the marketplace as being something that's healthy, that's vitamin fortified, that's high in calcium, that's good for kids, and so on. You see all those favorable attributes and dimensions of the milk category? Now, we're creating an association with milk and Oreos. So from a strategic standpoint, what they did is very compelling. So certainly perceived quality is very important, but there's also got to be performance quality. You can't just say that your product is, for example, high quality. There's got to be performance. And that's one of the challenges that Toyota faced fairly recently, was that there's definitely a perception in the marketplace that Toyota is a high quality car, that they make high quality products, whether it's cars or trucks or SUVs. The perceived quality is very high. Where they face the challenge, and in fact, what's really important is that consumers in the United States have demonstrated that they're willing to pay a premium for Toyota because of the perception that it delivers high quality. So you might think, when you think about the automotive industry in the United States, you might think that the reason Toyota is so successful is because they're selling products at a low price. You might think they're just very efficient and they're able to sell comparable products at a price lower than Ford, General Motors, Chrysler. It's not true. Actually, they charge a premium for their product. They actually charge more. If you go to a Chrysler dealership, you go to a Ford dealership, you're going to see, especially Chrysler, and I think of some of the vehicles that I saw in their showroom, you might really be quite surprised. They've invested a tremendous amount of money, and I'm talking billions of dollars, over the last few years in innovation and new product development and new product designs. And they have some cars in their lineup, some vehicles in their lineup that are actually really very attractive. And they're much less expensive than Toyota vehicles. Remember, many of the cars that Toyota makes are made in Japan. Now that's changed quite a bit over the last 10 years. Because now there's a good number of Toyota vehicles that are either made or assembled in the United States. But think about it. If you look at the sticker in the window of Chrysler or a Ford vehicle, what does it say the destination charge is? How much?
What's the destination charge?
$750 to ship the car from Detroit to the showroom. That's the destination charge. How much does it cost to ship the car to the showroom? So a lot of people don't realize that they're paying to have the car shipped. So that's from, let's say, Detroit to New York. So from the state of Michigan to New York, you're paying like $650, $700, $750 to ship the car. Well, how much do you think it costs to ship the car from Japan? So there's definitely the price that consumers pay is much higher, but yet consumers are willing to pay a premium because of
Perceived quality.
Yeah, the perceived quality. And in this case, the perceived quality is very high. It's perceived as being a very high quality product. And that's why you can understand almost why they were so reluctant to have a recall when they were having trouble with the accelerator in their car. Because then it called into question the perceived quality and drew attention to performance quality. That, wait a minute, of course, yeah, the perceived quality is very high, but performance quality is not measuring up. So there's a disconnect between the perceived quality and the performance quality. You remember what happened with Toyota?
The recall?
Yeah, when they had problems with the accelerator, their car would accelerate from 0 to 60 in like 2.1 second. The problem is that you weren't pressing on the gas. And so,
It was a mess.
right, it was the floor mats, exactly. It was the floor mats. That's what I always tell my students now. If you ever get into a difficult situation, and if you're before the press, just tell them it's not your fault. Just blame it on the floor mats. All right? Tell them it's the floor mats. That's the reason. So that's the reason they said that the car would suddenly accelerate from 0 to 60 or even 90 miles per hour is because it was the floor mats.
They didn't get hurt that badly.
They did see this.
It was a brief period, but during that brief period, I mean, they
It was like
it all.
almost a million cars being recalled.
Yeah, but they rebounded pretty
Yeah,
quickly
they
from
rebounded.
it. They, once it was out, they acted pretty appropriately.
Yeah, after that there was definitely a negative impact on their sales, which means they would definitely saw less sales of Toyota vehicles. But they've been trying very hard to reposition themselves in the marketplace and regain that high perceived quality. But what I think is amusing to me is that the tagline that they have associated with their brand, moving forward.
Whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah, exactly. You see, somebody was paying attention. You see, whether you want to or not, exactly, right, Daniel? I mean, they only tell you part of the story. Yeah, it moves forward, but if you're not pressing on the gas, that's problematic. No? What do you think, Stepansky? You don't think that's a problem? I mean, if the car drives itself, that's impressive, but you don't want to go from 0 to 90 and you're in your driveway and then you just like go through the garage door and that's like undesirable. So let's talk about the need to, questions about that? All right, so quality, what we need to do is then think about quality as it relates to value. Because value is a function of quality, which you said is very significant, whether it's perceived quality or performance quality. It's a function of quality, price, and benefits. So for something to be a good value, it doesn't mean that it's a low price. It could be a high price, but if the quality level is also very high and the benefits are also very significant, so there's numerous features and benefits, then people might perceive that as a good value. Do you agree? Does that make sense? What do you think? So do you always buy the flat panel, high definition, 1080p LCD monitor? That's the lowest. That's the lowest price.
How big is it?
54 inches.
Doable.
It's doable.
Yeah.
But so do you always buy the one that's the lowest price, or sometimes do you buy the one that's a high price?
Case
Like
by
the middle.
case. Case by case.
So it depends, case by case.
Case by
Yeah.
case.
So it doesn't mean that you would just buy the one that's the least expensive.
'Cause
Do you guys agree?
Also, there's
Sometimes
quality.
price, you think there's quality involved in the price.
So that, so do we agree that at a higher price, that our expectation is that at a higher price, we're going to get more benefits, there's going to be more features, and it's going to be of a better quality. And in that case, whether we decide to purchase a product or not, then we perceive there to be a good value. Does everybody follow? So value doesn't mean that it's cheap. That's a common misconception, is people think that if something is a good value, that it has to be inexpensive. It doesn't have to be inexpensive. It could be a good value if it has a lot of features and benefits, if it's a very high quality. So, questions about that?
I feel like a quality to price ratio, would that be considered?
Yep, absolutely. So consciously or subconsciously, each customer is going to look at the ratio of price as in conjunction with the features, the benefits, and the quality.
Is there something that's like very inexpensive that's also very good quality then? I know it costs usually on things cost more because they're better quality. They're not always, but a lot of times it is. But is there something that is very inexpensive which is also very good quality?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that's up to the manufacturer to decide whether or not they're going to market a product at a price that's lower than the market would expect. Maybe that's their strategy. Maybe they've adopted a penetration pricing strategy. So that's the key, that they offer something that's a very good quality, but they offer it at a lower price than we would expect, because their expectation is that they're going to sell a lot of units in a very short period of time. And remember, we talked about the adoption curve model? That's intentional. So absolutely what Joshua is saying is that that could be their strategy. Penetration pricing. Offer good quality, numerous benefits and features, and sell it at a low price, or a relatively low price.
No, I actually got Coach was answered.
So we have some choices to make about the product that we're going to sell, the product or the service. Now, even though we might think that it's desirable to sell a standardized product from a manufacturing standpoint, a standardized product is going to be more efficient for us to produce. It's going to minimize manufacturing complexity, but it may not meet the market requirements. So in other words, again, what is the battle cry of the global marketer? Think global, but act local, which means that we need to customize the marketing mix. We need to change the price so that it's affordable in a particular market. We need to add features or take away features so that it's either affordable or relevant to the particular market. We got to customize our advertising campaign and our promotions, and also consider where we're going to get distribution on the product. Now, in some cases, that's not optional. And I would like to think that it's not optional in every case, because if you're to be successful, you need to tailor your product or service to the needs of the local market. But in some cases, we are faced with this issue here. Product homologation, which means that there is significant market requirements that are defined usually by the government and can keep our product from being successful in a given market. What would be a good example? Think about if we're going to sell a product that's electronic.
Is there certain standards it has to meet?
Right, so think about the voltage. Do all countries around the world have the same voltage in their outlets?
No.
So who could tell us? Tell us some of the differences. Who could give us some insight?
In Europe, they use the two. It's like wider. They just use two round.
Right, that's outlets.
So one issue, before we even deal with the actual amount of voltage, whether it's 110 or 120 or something else, is Jason is saying that the actual plug itself has got to be specific for that particular market. So all plugs are not the same. So some plugs look like this. And some plugs look like this. And some plugs
Yeah.
looks something like this, right? So now when we look at this on the board, you say, oh, this is, come on. This is, of course. Really? Really? Are you sure? Because a lot of companies make mistakes like this. They just think that, oh, we're going to sell a standardized product, and, oh, what do you mean the plug is different? You know? You have to do your research. You have to do the country analysis and understand what are the market requirements. So this is definitely like a deal breaker. Like nobody is going to buy your product. They might use a converter. It certainly adds a lot of complexity. And we're like, why do I, this one I buy it, then I have to have a separate plug, a plug for the plug, and
Actually,
but-
it also depends on the voltage.
and the voltage. So tell us now about the voltage. Besides the plug, which is a product design issue, but it's got to be able to accommodate the voltage, the differences in voltage. So the voltage is not the same in every outlet around the world. So our product has got to be able to accommodate that. The voltage is more or the voltage is less. So it seems like a blinding glimpse of the obvious, but so often companies make mistakes like this because they don't do their research. They don't do the country analysis, and they don't understand what the market requirements are. And something like this is not like just, that's beyond brilliant marketing. That's beyond selling products that are red in China because red is lucky in China. This is a requirement by the government that electronics sold in the country are going to be compatible with the voltage in that particular market. And that's what's meant by this term. Questions about that? Any other examples?
In England, they drive on the other side of the street. It's in the driver's side.
Everywhere.
Yeah, so the steering wheel has got to be what we would consider on the other side, right, from what we're used to in the United States. So absolutely. So you think, oh, well, a car is a car. Why can't... Well, yeah, that's going to be a little bit difficult. The steering wheel has got to be on what we would consider to be the passenger side in the United States. Even within the United States, there's some government regulations as we talk about cars. So Jason took us to cars, so let's talk about that. What is an important regulation as it relates to cars in the United States that's significant for auto manufacturers who want to sell their cars in the U.S.?
As far as miles and kilometers, also on the speedometer.
Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. So those that are on the metric system, that's going to be significant. Absolutely. That's a good point. What else? What else about cars? Go ahead.
Emissions and miles per gallon.
Yeah, absolutely. Emissions. And you say emissions, what does that mean? What do you mean emissions? What is that about? Why is that significant? What is the requirement in California?
We care about our air.
Finally, I hope so. Because we have no ozone layer anymore.
We have some.
So now we care. Well, some people care, some people, apparently, I don't know. So tell us about emissions. What's the issue there? Why is that an issue from a global marketing perspective?
People want to know about the carbon footprint of the product that you buy.
Absolutely. But what about from the product homologation standpoint? Why is that significant? What does the government regulation have to do with our ability to sell a product, or in this case a car, in the United States and also specifically in California? Go ahead.
Aren't some countries allotted X amount of like carbon footprint that they release per year, right? And then they get charged if they. Is that true?
Yeah, there's
I've heard
absolutely.
of that,
That's
but I
what
wasn't really
it's. That's what the. That's what they're trying to achieve, but obviously there's a lot of pushback because the newly industrialized nations.
Or like China's upset because they're doing our legwork but they have bad, so like when we're importing products, right, are we getting charged for that, carbon footprint when it's being produced in China and, they don't have great factories necessarily. But, so we're not actually producing the carbon, manufacturing it, but we're consuming it.
Oh, that's an interesting point too.
Yeah.
But also their pushback is that, well, because you were industrialized before us and you produced an unlimited amount of carbon and you destroyed the environment, now the industrialization of our country has to be constrained. They say, well, how is that fair? Is that really fair? What, who is checking you? Now we got checkers checking the checker. They're like, well, that's...
Wasn't that a big push for the ISO 9000 or whatever?
Well, ISO 9000 is something that's been around a long time and has to do with quality. And so ISO 9000 is significant because around the world, what it is a standardized approach to delivering quality. And you could get certified. You could get ISO 9000 certified. And what's the significance of ISO 9000?
Means it meets up to the national standard of things. Meaning you're not getting a piece of garbage. Hopefully.
Well, yeah, there's certain standards that are set as to what it means in an operation to deliver quality and to operate as a manufacturer that delivers high quality products. So importantly, it's standardized. So around the world, this is relevant if you're ISO 9000 certified. And that's a goal to standardize quality. So we talk about quality at some level, that there's some standardization. But that's going to vary from category to category. So for example, is durability an important aspect of quality in all categories? So do all products need to be durable?
Depends on the consumers. No.
Well, think about the product. That's what I'm asking you is that does your notebook need to be durable?
No.
Yes.
Yeah. You want it to fall apart, yeah, of course.
What about your car?
Yes.
What about your hoodie?
I think everything to an extent, just to an extent.
To some extent?
Yeah.
So we
Some
think it's on a
certain-
continuum?
Yeah, like even fruits, like you want the packaging to be durable or else your fruit's gonna get all, bruised. I mean, everything to some extent, you need durability.
And what about reliability? So what would be an example of reliability? So with cars, for example, every time you put the key in and turn the ignition, the car will start. Is that applicable to your sneakers?
Yeah, every time you put them on, you hope they don't fall off.
But is that durability or reliability?
You're a little bit of both.
You think it's a little bit of both?
Well,
the key has to be
reliability
able
might
to
be
turn
that
it on.
But what about with the sneakers?
Same thing.
So tell us, what about the sneakers that is reliable? That every time you put it on, what, you could make a jump shot like Michael Jordan, or how does that work exactly?
No, but the grips will feel
Performance.
a certain way.
It
You don't
protects your
slip,
feet.
right?
It's
When
one
you
of
make
those
it- when you make
wires
a
that
sharp
protect your
cut.
feet.
So it protects your
Doesn't
feet?
come off.
What do you rely for? The shoes don't get molded in very quickly, that's durability.
And what about, is that something different from functionality? Durability, reliability, functionality, are those all the
I
same
think
thing?
durability and reliability and functionality all kind of work together.
In certain
It's kind of
places,
like part of the matrix.
Well,
Part of a matrix?
It's all part of, it's
We'll get to
They
the-
say the Matrix or a Matrix?
They're not mutual.
Because the Matrix is something else, right?
Yeah.
Is there a movie or something like that?
Yeah.
in certain products, it's probably they're all in certain products. They can all be one of the same, but while in other products they'll be very different.
And what about safe? So does,
Well, yeah, some sneakers, high tops will protect you from like rolling your ankle. That might be your liability.
what about your t-shirt? Does it need to be safe?
Like as long as it wasn't
Yeah,
made
if
out.
if you're allergic to some material, maybe you'll get a rash.
So
No arsenic.
is that more significant? Is that more significant than, let's say, in the pharmaceutical category? So what does safety mean in pharmaceuticals versus safety in apparel?
Very different.
Why? Why is it different?
obvious.
What does it mean to say it's safe to wear that shirt versus it's safe to take this allergy medication? Go ahead.
Pharmaceuticals, you're dealing with lethal dosage. So, I mean, it's a bigger scale of safety.
So in a category, let's say for pain relief, to say that it's safe to use that product means that if you take 2 Tylenol, that your headache will go away, but you'll still be there. Versus what Julian is saying is that it might be safe to use that that t-shirt, but you might get a rash. So what I want to share with you is that safety, reliability, durability, all of those different dimensions are going to translate to different requirements depending on the category. And in some cases, it's certainly more relevant, like you were pointing out. Well, there's no in-between to say, well, sometimes it's safe to take those pills. Well, what do you mean sometimes? The other times, what, people die? Like, how does that work? Well, in Julian's category, they say, well, you might get a rash. All right, you might get a rash. Now, you might still buy it anyway. I might get a rash. Not all the time. Sometimes maybe only tall people get rashes. Who knows? Or tall people with beards, right? Or tall people that have beards this semester but didn't have beards last semester. So it's going to depend on the category. So we need to understand that. We need to understand what the requirements are for the category and how we're going to meet those requirements or exceed those requirements. And in some cases, the implications can be very significant if we don't meet the expectations and the requirements of the category. Questions? What's derived demand? What is derived demand? This is certainly particularly relevant as we think about industrial markets, the idea of derived demand.
Isn't it where you depend on other country to get your source, to get your products, and you depend on somebody else for your products?
That's part of it. Who could elaborate on that?
When like demand in a product comes from like the demand in another product or something.
Right. Everybody got that? So that's good. Jason, you're the man. Yeah. So tell us. So you guys follow when we talk about derived demand? Derived demand means that the demand, let's say for our manufacturing equipment, is going to be determined by the demand for a particular, let's say, consumer product. So the book gives an example about the demand for manufacturing equipment as it relates to the consumer demand for shower stalls. So if you have a certain demand for shower stalls, that's going to impact the demand for that manufacturing equipment. So if the demand goes up, let's say 10%, if the demand for shower stalls, everybody decides they're going to renovate their bathroom and they're going to buy shower stalls, then as a result, the demand for manufacturing equipment that might be involving some type of injection molding, which we use with plastics, or the shower stall has some sort of plastic component, that the demand for those products in the industrial sector is going to go up. But conversely, what happens if the demand for shower stalls goes down?
And the price for that manufacturing equipment goes down as well.
The price.
Yeah.
Well, the price could go down, or they might stop making them, right? They might stop making the equipment, because then you're going to have a surplus in the market. You're going to have overcapacity. So the demand in the marketplace is for 20 million units, but the industry has capacity to make 100 million units per year. Well, then you're going to stop making those units, right? You're gonna, that equipment that makes the shower stalls. Does that make sense? So you see how they work together? So consumer demand impacts industrial demand. So it's not just the manufacturer of the shower stalls, but also the manufacturer of the company that makes the equipment that makes the shower stalls. That's why it's so important to stimulate the economy, that people spend. Because $1 is really 10. Why is that? What does that mean to say $1 is really 10? Say, wow, you're really, wow, that's amazing. Coach, come on, you're daydreaming. How is $1 10? Why is $1 10? Why, if we spend $1, is that really $10? What happens when we spend that $1?
It gets back to the companies. The companies say, "Oh, now we need to, produce more of these machines or whatever, these equipment to make it."
So we're gonna
Invest that money.
we're gonna spend $1, and we're gonna purchase a bottle of Pepsi. When we spend $1 in the store, then what happens is that the retailer uses that money to pay their employees. So they pay 500 employees. And each of those employees goes out and buys, let's say they go out and buy the same product. Let's say they also go out and buy a bottle of Coke.
Pepsi.
Or Pepsi. Then you see how you have the multiplier effect. I give you $1, you take that $1, and then you buy something, and then the money that you gave to the other person, they use to buy something. And so we have the multiplier effect, which is an important concept in economics. So you hire somebody to renovate your bathroom. Well, that contractor hires 10 people. And those 10 people have somebody do their landscaping, or they use part of their income to purchase groceries, or they have somebody paint their house. And so as that dollar goes through the economy, it has a very significant impact. And we refer to that as the multiplier, right? The money multiplier. So that's why I say $1 is really 10. And so in derived demand, the demand for a bottle of Coke or a bottle of Pepsi is going to have an impact on the production of bottling equipment. So in some cases, companies that, let's say, produce bottling equipment, in a given year, they might shut down because they have no demand to produce bottling equipment. Does that seem plausible in any given category? In some cases, look at the automotive industry, which in the US, there's been overcapacity for many years, and that's been the challenge for Ford Chrysler and General Motors is that they had this overcapacity. But what about if you were the company that manufactured the equipment that molded sheet metal used to construct the car or parts of the car, and demand for Ford vehicles keeps going down? Or what about if you were the company that made the bolts, right? The bolts or the screws for the car. Well, if one year General Motors is producing 8 million cars, and the next year they're producing 6 million cars, then you're going to produce a lot less bolts. But also, not just that, what about the company that was making the equipment that made the bolts and the screws? So derived demand is a very important concept that we need to understand. And one of our challenges is to understand how that impacts global consumption, because we operate in a global economy. So you don't just think about demand in the United States. We're thinking about where we could sell Pepsi or bottling equipment or making machines everywhere around the world. And so when we talk about capacity or overcapacity, very often we're thinking about that from a global perspective. So that's really alarming when you think about a category in a global perspective and say, you know what, overall, worldwide, we have an overcapacity of bolt making. So in other words, we only need 500 million bolts, but the industry as a whole can make 5 billion bolts. So if you were involved in an industry that manufactured bolts, would you be concerned? That's a problem. Because our fixed costs are still the same. So whether we make 1 bolt or 1 million bolts or 1 billion bolts, our fixed costs are still the same. Our total fixed cost. The difference is that when we go from 1 million to 1 billion bolts per year, that we're able to spread those fixed costs over a greater number of units. So our total fixed cost will still be the same, but our unit fixed cost will decline. So that's why the production level is so important. That's why we want to maximize the level of production. So the more units that we make, generally the better. And that's why, remember we were talking about dumping? So why will the company manufacture products and then sell it less than its cost? Because they're trying to deal with this issue of overcapacity and they want to spread the fixed costs over as many units as possible. All right, let's talk about the stages of economic development. You ready? You can do it. Yes, you can. All right, 5 stages. And this is what we're alluding to when we're talking about this issue of pollution and carbon footprint. It relates, and it's gonna, the importance and significance and sensitivity is gonna vary based on the stage of economic development. So for example, stage 1 is what we refer to as a traditional society. So what do you interpret that as meaning in terms of the level of industrialization? What does that mean? So if we look at a particular market, now remember when we do our country analysis, we're going to have to make this assessment. Now you could go to certain resources online. So for example, the CIA fact book has a significant amount of information about countries around the world. And one of the things that they'll address is this issue of the stage of economic development. But we still have to make a decision for ourselves, because this is going to impact what? Our mode of entry and other aspects of our marketing plan. Maybe we won't even try to penetrate that particular market. Maybe the household penetration level is very high or very low. So what does that mean when we say traditional society? Generally, it means that the level of industrialization is at a very basic level and is associated with the mining or drilling or extraction of natural resources, whether that's coal or diamonds or some other natural resource. But it's not manufacturing cars, for example. All right, stage 2. Stage 2 is what's known as the precondition for takeoff. Stage 3 is takeoff. 4 is drive to maturity. And 5 is the age of mass consumption. So stage 2, why do we call that the precondition for takeoff?
It's like when they're doing like telecommunications and things like that, like the standard, the basis of what everything else is going to work off of.
Yeah, we're definitely not fully industrialized at that point, but we're starting to move in that direction. Why do we care? As global marketers, why do we care about this? Why do we say, who cares about these 5 stages? So what if it was 6 stages, 10 stages? Why? Why is that important to us? How are we going to make this assessment actionable? What do we do with this information? What's the takeaway, if you will, no pun intended in this case, right? To say that we're in the early stages of takeoff, like you said, with telecommunications, power generation, versus manufacturing products that could either be durable or, as us marketers have creatively termed, non-durable products, which often is referred to as consumable products. What's the difference between durable and consumable products?
Consumable would be maybe something like food.
Yeah, food would be a good example, so that it has a limited number of uses,
Or like
and
plastic
it's
cups.
done, right? That you have, you could get 10 glasses of orange juice for half a gallon, let's say, and then you have to buy more. Versus durable,
Printer.
a printer, so you could use it again and again. Eventually, at some point, it might wear out, but it's not something that's
Something
that you
you
could use up, per se.
It's basically long term versus short term.
Right, absolutely. So in stage 3, the country is at a point where they're making durable and consumable products. Good, no?
What would be an example of like the longest term consumable product? Like, is it just things that we use up in one day, or
Consumable?
yeah, like is there something that's consumable that lasts a week or a month, or
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, it depends on like the size of your household, for example. So,
Last a week, but that's the
yeah, what about like laundry detergent? You buy 64 ounces, and you're going to be able to do, what do they say, 32 loads, and then it's done? Well, if it's just for you and your roommate, then that might last 2 months, but if it's for a family of 5, that might be 2 weeks.
neither way it's consumable.
Right, in that case, because consumable means that
Using
although it's 2 weeks versus 2 months, the idea is it's something that you use up.
and you have to replenish after.
Absolutely. Versus, and that's why I was trying to make that distinction about the printer, is that yes, at some point it's going to wear out. It's going to stop working. But
I mean, in that case, there's nothing that's general. You know, a car also. You could say, I bought this car, use it for 10 years, and then you're like, all right, it's not really worth much anymore. It's not, you know, the engine's failing, and you know, you can't really.
right, so it has.
Then again, in that respect, you can also replace something, and then it's, you know, you pay a significant amount, and you know, you replace something, and now it's, you know, fully functional.
Yes, but with the printer or the car, when you drive the car or you print something, you're not using it up.
Right.
You're not consuming it. You're using it, but you're not consuming it.
The ink would be something that's like, I guess, consumable.
Yeah, the ink, that's a good point. Yeah, definitely. You have a cartridge, and it has a limited number of uses, and each time that you print, you consume it, right? And then until there's no more. That's different from wearing something out. Do you guys agree? Questions? No questions? But a couple of more minutes. I just want you to think this through. I want to know why this is important, the stage of economic development. As global marketers, why do we care that the stage of economic development varies from country to country? Why is that important to us? Why do we spend time today talking about that? How is that going to help us to be an effective multinational organization?
I was going to say, you know, if it's a country where, you know, a large, you know, percentage of the you know, population are living in huts, as opposed to a very, you know, commercial built-up area where there are buildings. You know, you're not going to go selling your $500 computers to these people in huts because they might not be able to afford. While, you know, there's people who are living in buildings and have outlets and have money and whatnot.
So there's no need for our product.
Right. There could be no need, no demand at all.
Right. So very important that
They don't have electricity.
Exactly. They may not even have electricity, and we want to sell them computers, flat panel what?
Television, LED.
Right, LED, not to be confused with LCD or plasma, right?
LED.
What are we doing? Well, we're trying to sell them expensive watches. People don't have what to eat. So we need to understand that to determine whether or not there's a need for our product. If it's feasible or even possible to operate our business there, if we're going to engage in foreign direct investment, yeah, absolutely, so the level of disposable income, but also whether or not the infrastructure of the country can support our operation. So if we wanted to build a manufacturing facility there, what is our business model going to be based on? In newly industrialized, or what we describe here as the precondition for takeoff, what the book describes as stage 2. But then there may not be enough electricity to run our manufacturing facility. So we might think, yes, great idea. We're going to operate, we're going to build a manufacturing facility in Vietnam. So you might think, oh, that's great, yes. The labor is going to be very inexpensive, but you have no electric, for example. That's a problem. And that's, you know, stage 2 is basically where most would say that Vietnam is in stage 2, where they are producing their own energy and electricity at some level, but it may not be enough for our manufacturing facility. Or maybe they only provide electricity 3 days a week. And our business model is that we're going to operate 24/7, 365 days a year. So it's critical for us to understand this. All right, so have a good night. Do good things. You can do it. Yes, you can.
It's all about Stefanski.
Stefanski, you know they say